Hey, hi, hello, I'm Ben, and it's that time of year again because the Women's Prize for Fiction longlist is in sight. Predictions videos are some of my favourite ones to make, not because I'm ever particularly right, but because it is fun to guess and very fun to bring books to my own attention and to your attention that we all might not have otherwise heard of if we weren't on the hunt for some potential surprises that might be appearing on the list. This is my third year now making predictions for this prize. Last year I did even more abysmally than usual because I only got one right, way down from the 4 I guessed in my very first predictions video. So let's see if I can bring that average back up again this year. First though, the dates that you need to know for this year's prize. So on the 4th of March, the long list of 16 books will be announced. Then on the 2nd of April, the shortlist will be revealed, which is just 6 of those 16 books. And then one winner will be crowned on the 12th of June. I am not a huge fan of this schedule because it means that there are just 4 weeks and 1 day between the long list and shortlist announcements, but then over 2 months between the shortlist and the winner. Those timings are just a little bit weird to me. I'd much rather have longer with the long list. I know as a non-judge there is no reason for any of us to need to read all of the long list before the shortlist is announced, but I think part of the fun of the long list stage is like picking your own shortlist before you get influenced by the books that actually made the real shortlist. What that means for me is that I'm probably just going to sit out the long list stage this year, except for any books that really grabbed me or which I already wanted to read anyway, and then I might just join in and read the whole shortlist. A quick reminder of the eligibility criteria for this prize then. So all of the books, in order to be eligible, must be written by a woman. They must be written originally in English, so no translations. They must also be a full-length novel, so the prize specifically specifies that short story collections are not eligible, and it's also fairly unique in that it specifies a minimum word count of 30,000 words. The Women's Prize rules say that any book between 12,000 and 30,000 words counts for them as a novella and are therefore not eligible for this novel-focused prize. It is, however, very hard to know the exact word count of a novel because it's a data item that's very rarely published. There are stats online, but a lot of these are just like estimates based on the audiobook length, so I don't think they're all that reliable. I have resorted this year to like counting the number of words on a couple of pages and then using that to extrapolate what I think the word count is based on the page count. I appreciate that that is slightly unhinged behaviour, but it has helped me narrow down some of my choices. Books for this prize must have been published in the UK between the 1st of April 2024 and the 31st of March 2025. So that means something like Held by Anne Michaels, which has very much been on all of our radars during the eligibility period because it was nominated for the Booker. That was actually released in 2023, so it's not eligible for the prize this year. The author must be alive at the opening date of submissions, which works a little bit differently from the Booker prizes, where the author must remain alive throughout the whole process. So if an author is nominated and the worst should happen, they can still continue in the Women's Prize. Books must be published by established publishing houses in the UK, so it can't be a book that is self-published or published via a vanity press. For the second year in a row, the Women's Prize has changed the rules on how many books can be submitted by each publisher or imprint. So last year, they changed it to be a lot more like the Booker Prize, where the number of entries you could make was based in part on your past performance. This year it is just based on the number of fiction titles that the publisher puts out during the eligibility period. So if a publisher releases fewer than 15 new titles, they can submit 1 book, and if they publish 15 titles or more, they can submit 2, which I like because it's quite nice and simple. There are a few additions to this though, so each publisher can also make a suggestion for a call-in title. So basically they write a short summary, almost a pitch, to suggest why they think the judges should also consider this title. And it's up to the judges whether they call those books in and add them to their TBR. There is no obligation to read call-in suggestions as there is for like the general submissions to the prize. There is also the concept of free passes, which means that if an author has been shortlisted in the last 10 years or they have won the prize in any year at all, the publisher can submit their book without using up one of their submission spots. There are 6 former winners that I have spied with releases in the eligibility period. So Lionel Shriver's got Mania, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's got her forthcoming Dream Count, Tia Obret has released The Morningside, Emma McBride has very recently released The City Changes Its Face, which is a sequel, I think, to her book The Lesser Bohemians. Ali Smith has released Glyph, and Susanna Clarke has also had a book out which I have forgotten the name of, but it's definitely not eligible because it's way too short. I think any of these authors could well make the cut, although I would be quite surprised to see either Shriver or Adichie included, only because they've become quite knowingly politically controversial in recent years. And including them could really overshadow or dominate the discourse about the list. And given the Women's Prize's focus on accessibility and inclusion, I don't know if that's what they are going to want, but who knows, anything could happen. There are another 6 authors which I think will get free passes because they are former shortlistees in the last 10 years. So Rachel Cusk has Parade, Anne Tyler has 3 Days in June, Pat Barker's The Voyage Home is the final part of a trilogy, Elif Shafak has released There Are Rivers in the Sky, and Lisa Allen Agostini has a book called Death in the Dry River, but I don't think this is eligible because it doesn't seem to have been published by a UK company. The rules are quite specific about the company needing to be registered with Companies House in the UK, and I had a look for the publisher but couldn't find it, so I don't think that one will make its way in front of the judges. Speaking of the judges, let's have a quick run through of this year's judging panel, because I do think it impacts our expectations of what we might see on the list. So, Kit Duval is this year's chair of judges. She is an author best known for her novel My Name is Leon, and has set up a scholarship to help improve working class representation in the arts, which I think is a really great endeavour. She's joined by another author, Diana Evans, who won the very first Women's Prize Award for Debut Novelists in 2006 and was shortlisted for the main Women's Prize in 2019 with her novel Ordinary People. Bryony Gordon is another author and a journalist most known for her memoirs on issues of mental health. Deborah Joseph is the editor-in-chief of a UK magazine, Glamour UK. And the judging panel is rounded out by Amelia Warner, who is a composer noted for her award-winning film scores. And she's also previously been known by her stage name Slow Moving Millie, who you may remember for having recorded that cover of the Smiths' Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want, which was used in a John Lewis Christmas advert. I actually really vividly remember that advert, so it's definitely done its job. Right, let's do it. Let's get into the predictions. I know that's the main reason you are here. As usual, I'm going to put all of the books that I've chosen into categories. In this video though, I'm going to do it a little bit differently because the categories are all going to be song titles, but I am not going to tell you who the artist of each song is until the end of the video. So you can treat this not just as a predictions video, but as like a mini music quiz. If you want to play along, hang around until the end of the video. I will tell you who each artist is, and you can see how many you got right. The first category is called How Big, How Blue, How Beautiful. And this is because there are quite a few big name authors with eligible books this year, and all of them seem to have blue covers. And for my money, all of these covers are pretty beautiful as well. My first pick in this category is There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. Elif Shafak is no stranger to this prize. She has been shortlisted for her previous novel, The Island of Missing Trees. This latest novel from her is told across a great swathe of time and is about 3 characters living on the banks of the River Tigris and the River Thames. I believe the premise of this one is that it follows a single raindrop as it travels through the water cycle and through the centuries. And I think a novel about how precious water is, how important it is to all of our lives, feels very timely given the threats of climate change in terms of flooding and rising sea levels and river pollution. That's a huge problem in the UK at least, but also because of water security, which is something that has started to rear its head in some places. But I think that's only going to become a growing problem as the years pass. I have heard that this book is just as beautiful as its cover, and to be honest, I'd be pleased if it was just half as beautiful as its cover, because I think this is a real stunning book. And that raindrop concept really reminds me of the bit in Maggie O'Farrell's Hamnet about the flea, if anyone has read that and remembers that part. And that famously won the Women's Prize, so maybe this is a really good fit. My next choice in this grouping is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. Love her or hate her, there is no denying that Sally Rooney is a literary phenomenon, but she hasn't really made huge inroads with the Women's Prize. She has been longlisted once in 2019 for Normal People, and then her last book, Beautiful World, Where Are You? That did not get a look in really on any prizes at all, but I thought it was a really good book. Intermezzo, though, may well mark her return to the list. This one is about two brothers. One is a lawyer, the other is a competitive chess player, so they are very different, and they are dealing with their father's death. I assume that it will be filled with Rooney's trademark keen observation on relationships. Grief is a pretty common theme on literary prize lists, at least in recent years, and I have heard some readers call this Rooney's best yet, so I think it could stand a pretty decent chance of making the cut. And then finally, we have a very recent release, which is 3 Days in June by Anne Tyler. This is about a formerly married couple forced to spend some time in each other's company in the run-up to their daughter's wedding. I've only read one novel from Anne Tyler before, but she writes the quotidian, like normal everyday things, so beautifully and generously and truthfully. And I wonder if this is something that the list needs, or perhaps something that I need from this list. Because in 2025, our lives feel so proximate every single day to global catastrophe and panic in a way that is just utterly exhausting. And a story that takes us out of that and reminds us of the smaller things, however briefly, could be quite comforting. And again, this is just another stunning cover. It's got this like really nice sketch motif stuff on the front, which carries on into the end papers, which is really lovely. I have to say, I did almost also include Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors in this category, which is another book that doesn't feature blue on the cover as much as these other ones do, but it has blue in the title. But I couldn't bring myself to, because I really did not enjoy Cleopatra and Frankenstein. But who knows? I've been wrong about this before. I felt very similarly about Megan Nolan, because I did not like her debut novel, but then I loved Ordinary Human Failings. So if anyone out there has read both Cleopatra and Frankenstein and Blue Sisters, are they similar? Are they different? Tell me if I'm going to hate it or not. Our next category and our song title is Independent Women Part 1. Although I should clarify that there is no Part 2, that is just part of the song title. This category is all about indie presses or small presses. I think it's awesome that the Women's Prize makes space for books from smaller presses. Perhaps that's what a 16-book longlist allows you to do, but it's really cool when it does happen. Last year, I'd never heard of Epoch Press, for instance, but then their title, In Defence of the Act, was longlisted, and it turned out to be a really fantastic read. So I'm hoping that we get more of that this year. My first pick for this category is Gloss by Kyra Wilder. This is about 3 women who meet on an apple farm in California, and they take part in this alternative therapy program for young women with eating disorders. And then we come back to them years later when they are testifying at the trial of the man behind the program. It's supposed to be quite fragmentary and poetic and surreal, and it loosely uses the myth of Hesperides. It's not a myth that I'm familiar with, and I actually kind of want to go into this not knowing that myth because I don't want the story spoiled. I do think this one sounds really great though, and it would be an absolutely well-deserved boon for the small press Le Fugitive. I've just recently become a subscriber to them. I get like 3 books a year, and this is the first one I've received, so I'm very excited to get into it. And that is a subscription that I pay for. I am not affiliated with them in any way. I just like the work that they do. Okay, for my next pick, the Women's Prize often has some genre fiction in the mix. In fact, it explicitly encourages it in the rules. And I think I've found a thriller that would be absolutely perfect for the prize. I've chosen Jackal by Erin E. Adams. This is from Dead Ink, and it's about a black woman who returns to the predominantly white town she grew up in for the wedding of her friend, until the daughter of the bride and groom disappears. And so the hunt is on to find her and uncover what is going on. It's a book that's supposed to be a real page-turner, a genuinely scary story, but also one that tackles real social issues of how black women are valued in society, and often how their suffering is downplayed or ignored. I think this could be a really powerful story to bring to a wider range of readers. My next pick is A Mouthful of Salt by Reem Ghaffar. This is set in a small village in Sudan as the villagers wrestle with the disappearance of a young boy presumed drowned in the Nile. And then, while they are still searching, more tragedies seem to befall their village, so they start to feel that it's not just a coincidence, that there is something going on, they are in some way Cursed. The book won the Island Prize in 2023, which is a prize for unpublished African authors, and then she went on to be a judge for the 2024 edition of that prize, alongside, interestingly, one of the judges for this year's International Booker, Sana Goyal. I'm actually listening to this one on audio at the moment, and it's too early, I think, for me to have that many thoughts on it, but I am intrigued to see where it goes. My final indie pick is Behind You is the Sea by Susan Moadi Daraj. This book is about 3 Palestinian families in Baltimore in the US, and it takes in the wide range of experiences immigrants face across generations and class, and it aims to challenge stereotypes and shift perspectives. It's written as a set of interconnected short stories, so there is a chance that it might not be eligible, but I would say it's more along the lines of something like Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, and that made the shortlist, so if they're being consistent, then it should be okay. As with my international predictions, I think this is partly based on just an expectation of a Palestinian story feeling really important right now, and so I wouldn't be surprised if one was included. Another option would be The Coin by Yasmin Zahir. I did consider that one as well, but I think Behind You is the Sea felt a little more aligned with the sorts of books we normally see from the Women's Prize. Your next song title and my next category is Islands in the Stream, and these are books that have something, however tenuous, to do with islands. My first pick is Passion Tide by Monique Roffey. This is set in the Caribbean about 4 women who come together to speak out about how violence against women is often brushed under the carpet. Together, they defy the silence that is expected on them and often imposed on them, and their activism has some unexpected consequences. Roffey's previous novel, The Mermaid of Black Conch, won the Costa Prize, and it brought her work a much wider audience. I know this latest one is something that Simon Savage absolutely loved, so I would be quite excited to see her get some recognition from the Women's Prize. My next island-focused book is Welcome to Glorious Tuga by Francesca Siegel. This is a story about a zoologist who goes to study tortoises on the remote, fictitious island called Tuga. She's there to do some conservation work, but also to eat, pray, love her way to self-discovery and fulfillment. It's a book that's supposed to be all about island life and small communities, and has got lots of really nice character work. It's one that sounds like it's going to be full of gentle humour and low-stakes drama. And there's often one book that has that like cozy feeling, something like Dog of the North, which was nominated, was that last year or 2 years ago? I don't know, but it could fulfill that spot on this year's list. My last pick in this category is more of an island in the metaphorical sense, like your home as an island. I'm not even convincing myself, but this is where I've decided to place this book, and it is one of my predictions, so let me tell you about it. So often there is a book that overlaps both the Women's Prize and the Booker Prize. It's not always clear if it's going to be the year before or the year after, so it's possible that like none of the novels from the 2024 Booker appear on this year's Women's Prize list, and we actually get one that's going to end up on next year's prize, like on the 2025 Booker list. However, one novel from last year's Booker, written by a woman, that I think really hits on what the Women's Prize goes for in terms of accessibility and readability, but also just telling a really good story, but telling it about something that feels really important, is The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. This is set in the Netherlands in the 1960s, and it's about a woman unthinkably unmarried, living on her own in the family home she grew up in. And she's very house proud, she doesn't suffer fools, she's got a very biting tongue, but her life is turned upside down when her brother basically dumps his fiancée on her while he goes away on business, and we see what develops between these two completely different characters. These two islands in the stream, you might say. Am I convincing you yet? This book is such a brilliant ride. It's so well told, it feels like a lost classic, and I just think it would be a great fit for this prize. Judges, make it happen. My next category has got 2 song titles, only because I was worried about being able to pronounce one of them. So the first one is In Our Gritha Gajo, which is Irish Gaelic for In Our Hearts Forever. And the alternative title, which may end up being the only one depending on how I edit this, is The Galway Girl. And in case you can't work it out, these are books by Irish authors. We have already had one of those because Sally Rooney is Irish, but I decided she was a better pick for the first category. I don't know, it's just all arbitrary, isn't it? My first pick in this category, though, is Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. This came out only a few weeks ago, but it has been getting absolutely rave reviews from everyone and their grandma. It's about a woman who decides one day to take her children and flee her home because she no longer feels that it's safe for her or for them. And it's the story of her struggles to make that break with her old life and with her husband work. She really strives to make ends meet and she ends up living in a hotel room. And ultimately, she's just trying her best to stay away because, as the back of the book says, leaving is one thing, staying away is another. It sounds really excellent, and it's been blurbed by Roddy Doyle, who is the chair of judges for this year's English language booker. So whether this one makes the Women's Prize longlist or not, I don't think this is the last we will be hearing about this book in 2025. My other pick in this category is May All Your Skies Be Blue by Fiona Scarlett. This book is a love story, although I'm not actually sure if it's a romantic love story or a friendship love story, but it's structured around one woman's day working in her salon, and over the course of that day, she ruminates and reflects on her relationship with a boy she met one early 90s summer when she was just a kid, and we see how that relationship has ebbed and flowed over the years. This book is actually blurbed by Kit Duvall, who says it is authentic to the bone. Blurbs are about as good a clue as you can get when it comes to trying to guess which books a judging panel might pick, but surprisingly they are very hard to track down. I had to rifle through the entire new fiction hardback section of my local Waterstones to find that quote. The next category and song title is Go the Distance, because these are stories about journeys. And my first pick is Ordinary Time by Kathy Rensenbrink. This is a story that follows a vicar's wife who lives in Cornwall and seems to be a bit stifled and unappreciated, like her husband really prioritises God over her and she seems to really sort of ruffle feathers when she doesn't especially mean to. So when her brother calls on her for help, she leaves Cornwall for London, where she meets someone who turns her life upside down, or at least her perspective on it. This is a book that I think has a great shot because it's another one that has been blurbed by Kit Duvall, who says it is a beautiful and generous novel. And Rensenbrink also appeared on this anthology that Kit Duvall compiled and edited. I think it was called Common People, but its aim was to promote the work of working class authors. So it sounds like Rensenbrink's writing is to the judges' taste, and that must surely give it the edge when being considered for the prize. My other pick here is Sunbirds by Penelope Slocum. This is about a woman whose son went missing in the late 90s, but she still holds out hope that he is alive, and she's racked with guilt that for some reason, somehow, the whole thing was her fault. When her niece turns up one day with some new information, the two decide to head to the Himalayas to investigate for themselves. To be totally honest, I'm not 100% sure if this will even be submitted to the judges because it comes from John Murray's Press, who have an absolutely stacked lineup in this eligibility period, which includes Exile by Amy Walsh, Bodies by Christine Ann Foley, Gender Theory by Madeline Doherty, and The Artist by Lucy Steeds. My guess would be that they submit this book and The Artist, so I wouldn't actually be surprised if The Artist would be the one to make it because that's been getting really brilliant reviews as well. This does just seem like the sort of book and the sort of plot that I could imagine the Women's Prize supporting. My final category is called That's What Friends Are For, because these are stories of friendship. And the first one that I am suggesting may well be on the long list is The Fertile Earth by Ruthvika Rao. This is one I predicted for last year's Booker, and I was kind of disappointed not to see it on the list because it really does sound great. So let me tell you about it and see if you agree. It's set in post-independence India, and when it starts out, we meet 4 children who have made friends despite the class lines between them. They are then caught up in this devastating accident that ripples throughout their lives, and it becomes this big, sweeping historical epic about friendship and power and forbidden love and revenge. It has had a bit of recognition recently, being nominated for the Dylan Thomas Prize, and from the sounds of it, I think it would just be very well suited to the Women's Prize as well. My final choice in this category, and my final choice of my entire predictions list, is Wee Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Colwell Brown. This is set in Doncaster, or Donny as it's affectionately known, which if you are unfamiliar is a city in northern England. It's about young women, 3 best friends, and their experiences of the place they live. It's written in Donny dialect and feels very much like its intention is to be the portrait of a place, of a working class town, and the specificities of growing up there. I think that strong working class voice is something that really might appeal to Kit Duvall, given her work to promote working class authors. And so it feels like a story that may well deserve a wider audience that it might not otherwise get. And to top it off, it is blurbed by Ferdia Lennon, who wrote my favourite book of last year. And if he says it's good, well, I believe him. There we have it. Those are my 16 predictions. I have to say, it was so much harder getting this down to 16 books than it has been in previous years. And I'm not sure if that's because the field is so incredibly strong this year, or just because I know more books, like I'm exposed to more stuff because I am much, much deeper in the world of books. But in any case, I feel like in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to be in for such a treat with this long list, because I think I could have made like 3 lists, maybe 4 lists, and still had great options left over. So I do not envy the judges and the choices they have to make. Before we finish, let's do the results from the little music quiz, in case you were playing along. The first song was How Big, How Blue, How Beautiful, and that is a song by Florence and the Machine. Independent Women Part 1 is of course by Destiny's Child, an absolute classic. And speaking of classics, Islands in the Stream is a very classic song from the 80s by Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers. Our double header of Irish songs, so we've got In Our Gretha Joe, which is the opening track on an album by Fontaines DC, absolutely awesome band. And then the Galway Girl. If you said Ed Sheeran, then I'm afraid we cannot be friends, because that song is a crime and an insult to Ireland. And it's also called Galway Girl, not The Galway Girl. The Galway Girl is a song that was originally recorded by Steve Earle and Sharon Shannon, but it was re-recorded and then a big hit in Ireland by Mundy and Sharon Shannon. So if you said either of those, consider yourself correct. Go the Distance is one that Disney fans out there will know instantly because it's from the film Hercules. It was recorded by Roger Bart for the purposes of the film, but then there was a pop version released by Michael Bolton. So again, either of those answers, you are correct. And finally, we've got another one that's got 2 answers. So That's What Friends Are For was originally recorded and released by Rod Stewart, but then the famous version, the one that was a big, big hit, was by Dionne Warwick, Elton John, Gladys Knight and Stevie Wonder. So any of those and you're going to get a thumbs up from me. Let me know in the comments how you did in the music quiz if you did decide to take part in that silly little bit of fun. But also let me know what your thoughts are on the Women's Prize. Are you looking forward to the long list? Which books are you expecting to see? Are there any on my list that you have read and you would be in favour or against them making an appearance? I would love, as ever, to have a chat with you down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit like, because it does definitely help the channel out. And if you'd like to see more from me, well, hit subscribe and I release a new video about once a week. But until next time, toodles.